Right, so welcome everyone to the AccsMap version 6.1 introductory webinar. Let me share my screen. Okay, and hopefully everyone can see that. If they can't, then please let me know. Here we go. So, AccsMap 6.1 preview. There are lots of new features coming up within 6.1, so there's some improved communications. New display visuals and controls. I'll go into more detail in these in a moment. Some time savers, improved user experience, and there are also some input and validation additions. So let's take a look at this. So if I were to run up AccsMap 6.1 as normal, so obviously it's 6.1, copy, and log in. On startup, we'll see the first of the new features, which is the bottom right hand of the screen. On startup will appear a pop-up of Buchanan Computing News. There we go, as it appears. So this is the new Buchanan RSS news feed that will display relevant news notifications, such as the latest builds and upcoming AccsMap events, such as user groups. So you can see here, it will disappear in a moment, so it won't end up clogging up everyone's screens if they're trying to work, if there's an accident in that bottom part of the screen. As well as this, we've added, as I was saying, we've added new display visuals and controls. One of these being the new Buchanan mapping server toggle. So if we go to the display tab here, and you can see there's a new button here to toggle on and off the Buchanan mapping server. So if we were to move to an area of mapping, that would probably highlight this a little better. So here is an area without any master map data, any master map mapping. And if we go to the display tab, we can now toggle on and off the Buchanan mapping server. So depending on sort of mapping that you're after, you can put that there. There's also the option for supervisor users to change the settings for the Buchanan mapping server. Admin and Buchanan mapping server settings here. Supervisor users can change the settings here as they may wish. We've also added an added option. In fact, if I go back to a particular area of mapping that might highlight this better, just this one. Okay, so here are the accidents, some accidents here. We've added an option to display an arrow for each collision that shows vehicle one's direction of travel, because vehicle one is often recorded as the blameworthy culprit. So this is a quick way of just showing their direction of travel. This can be found under the display tab, and it's this little option here, vehicle one direction. Let's make the size 24. Okay, let it run through, and it shows the direction of travel for vehicle one within that accident. It does use the movement from, movement to fields, and you can actually color code it. So if we color code it by severity, then you can obviously see the color coded directional arrows. If you were to do a print preview, the legend would show severity, etc. correctly also. As well as this, in fact, let me turn that off. We've added the option to, with regards to the legend, that's the word, there, it used to previously be, if you made it floating, as I have here, then in AccsMap 6, if you dragged it out, it would often revert back to being docked in the same session. This is now changed so that within the same session, if I've got it as floating, it will stay as floating unless I were to redock it. Supervisor users can also go into admin, configuration, AccsMap, general settings, and here, once it opens up, you can change the default legend position on startup between docked and floating. So depending on what you might prefer, or users might prefer. This is a system-wide default, of course, it would be affecting all of the users. Next, for the new time savers. So after accidents have been selected inside a monitoring site or a polygon or a cluster, an option has been added to allow the date range to be modified without having to reselect accidents from the polygon. So if I were to come out of configuration and go to a particular monitoring site, here we go, and let's select this particular monitoring sites, okay, and then let's find one in particular. So if we go for this one over here, let's let it find. There we go. So we've got the site here. If I select the accidents within it, there we go. Monitoring, select accidents within this highlighted site. Come through that for a moment. There we go, I don't need to print it. And if I now were to do an AccsMap query, under selection, AccsMap query, there's the option here to adjust accident selection within selected sites. So I can now run a query and it will run for the accidents within that site that I've selected here, as opposed to doing all of them. This is the same for monitoring sites, but also for polygons and for those sorts of things. AccsMap polygons and clusters, that's what I was looking for. We've also, as an extra sort of setting, added in the ability to mark or set an accident or an accident selection that you'd like to revert back to. So if I put default accident selection back on, might show this a bit easier. So the idea of this is that you can have a marked or an accident selection that you have marked in order for you to go back to in case you need to go back to it for further analysis. So if we run a query, first of all, let's say of motorcycle accidents. Okay, so run the query, AccsMap query for accidents involving motorcycles. I can then run another query, which, let's say 17 to 24-year-old drivers. So just, I need to let's go back. The mistake I made was not to hit refine. So let's put the motorcycle ones back on. So it's refining the selection for the queries. There we go. So now I can mark this revert point, okay? So I can come back to it later using this button here. Obviously, it shows the current selections. If I were to now do another AccsMap query, so I hit refine this time, and let's say pick fatal and run the other query, it will now, if I show the act display, to find the accidents 3 times. Okay, there's just the one. But I can revert now back to that mark that I had previously left it as. And you can see the other accidents have popped up. So now it's removed the fatal query, and it just has the motorcyclists and the that age gap, that age range that I had defined. This doesn't replace the undo last query, which is still available and needs to be enabled within the AccsMap settings. Let's put default accidents back on. Improving user experience is, as always, a goal. And to that end, we've made it so that the info button on an accident will always keep that accident highlighted. So if I was to info, oh, that's the wrong one. If I was to info this accident here, and just let the form open, that accident will stay highlighted within the map window. Where's it gone? There we go. I moved the wrong way. So that accident here is still highlighted, despite the fact that the form is open so that you can easily identify which accident it is that you have selected. This was actually the most voted for feature in the last AccsMap user group, so hence its implementation, and I imagine it to be quite useful for many users. Within selecting accidents, so long as the map window is open, if you hit S on the keypad, for those that aren't aware, it opens up the snap tool, which enables you to easily select an accident, because the crosshair will appear, and then you can easily, and there you go, open up the accident as such. As well as this, with regards to user experience, we have also allowed for longer polygon and monitoring site and route table names up to 30 characters. This doesn't replace the description, but it should be noted that any names over 30 characters will be saved. It's just the names will be truncated a little. Another quality of life update is related to the predefined queries, which you may have noticed when I was in there earlier. So what we've done is we've added a set of recently used predefined queries. So the most recently used 12 predefined queries will appear within this list at the top here. Obviously, the further to the top it is, the more recently it was used. This is remembered across sessions, assuming that you don't delete any of the temp files, and it is at a user level, so each user will have their own specific recently used predefined queries list. As well as this, the AccsMap forms have had a bit of an update. A lot of this was done in some of the later builds of AccsMap version 6. If I ever see info this on screen. But some of the improvements include widening the form one entry and the configuration form also. And we've added the tools button here, which is sort of tidied it up a little bit, and you can see some of the options are now within this drop-down menu. So going on to the input and validation updates, if I lift them up, if this will hide again. And then go to validation, and if I just show some of the unvalidated accidents. The new validation check has been added to flag possible mistyped vehicles and casualties, or casualty references. For example, if an accident involved 2 vehicles, the vehicles should have a reference of 1 and 2, but this isn't always the case, especially if you're loading in data from certain sources. So if I find a particular accident to highlight this, 1, 9. Okay, yeah, let's find this accident. There we go. So as you can see, it's an unvalidated accident. And if I were to try to validate it, okay, it comes up with the error saying the vehicle reference greater than the number of vehicles in accident, and it gives us the number 3. So we can check this by just opening up the vehicle form for that accident. And as you can see, there are 2 vehicles, but they're 1 and 3. So obviously there's a mistake that's been made there, and it would need to be fixed before validating. Another new feature is the ability to easily revert the default validation checks. So in AccsMap, all validation checks are hard errors that would stop an accident being validated. So sometimes certain checks are needed, or you might need to turn them off in order to validate the accident. This might be a query type check, such as the casualty age. So if you go into validation options, there's the button down here to enable you to revert back to the default settings, validation settings, for when you're doing your validation, I suppose. Let's bring the mapping back on. So if you see what we're doing. There we go. There was also another last feature which can be enabled on request, and there we go. At the moment, likely due to the VPN. So this last feature is enabled on request, and this is the ability to lock a year to prevent or warn users if the edits are being made to accidents in that year. So it's available to supervisor users only, and you go onto validation and lock year for edits as such, and we can add or remove a year here from locking it for edits. So let's add 2014, for example. Okay, so now 2014 has been added to the list of locked years, and it will come up with a message that won't let you edit an accident from that year. Okay, so just to highlight that, if we go to view and find an accident from 2014, such as this one here, if I was to info it, and the form will open, and you'll notice that obviously this accident is a 2014 accident. And if I was to edit it, let's add some full stops to the end, the save button is grayed out and I'm unable to save it. So users that won't be able to accidentally or erroneously make errors or make changes to accidents when they shouldn't be able to. And then I can always go back to that same option and remove it. So validation, lock year, and I can go back and remove that option. So now if I was to go back into that accident as such, it opens, it will enable me to, if I put my full stops back, it would enable me to save it if I so wished. So if we now go just back to PowerPoint, go. So the targeted release date for AccsMap 6.1 is the end of July, and it will require MapInfo version 17.02 or above in the same way that AccsMap 6 did. So that was a quick sort of zoom through the updates coming into AccsMap 6.1. If anybody has any questions, let me know. And yeah, thank you for coming to the webinar.